I never imagined a simple oversight would reveal Jenna's true colors. "Margaret, I forgot my wallet. Can't you just cover for me this once? You always make a big deal out of your back pain, but come on, it can't be that bad." Her words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the air between us. I stood there, aghast, not just at her forgetting her wallet again, but at her blatant disregard for my condition. "You know, Jenna, my back pain isn't just a minor inconvenience, and it's not about the money," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising irritation. "It's about consideration, something you seem to lack." Jenna rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it sent a wave of anger through me. "Oh, please, Margaret, you're overreacting. It's just lunch." "I'll pay you back," she said, her tone implying the conversation was beneath her. This wasn't the first time Jenna had shown such disrespect. Since marrying my son Lucas, she had become increasingly brazen in her selfishness. I had hoped, for Lucas's sake, that she would change, but it was clear she saw no issue with her behavior. Arthur, my husband, always advised patience. "Give her time, Margaret, she'll come around." But as we walked out of the cafe, me having paid for our meals, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna's actions were a glimpse into a much darker side of her character. The drive home was silent. Arthur seemed to sense my frustration, choosing not to speak. I appreciated his understanding, but part of me wished he would share in my indignation. After all, Jenna's behavior affected us both. Upon arriving home, I found solace in my garden, a place where I could find peace and think. Yet, Jenna's words lingered, a bitter aftertaste that no amount of gardening could wash away. Later that evening, as Arthur and I sat down for dinner, he finally broke his silence. "Margaret, perhaps Jenna didn't mean it the way it came out. You know how she is, always speaking before thinking." I looked at him, a mix of disbelief and sadness in my eyes. "Arthur, when will it be enough? When will we stop making excuses for her? She's not just thoughtless, she's cruel." Arthur sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I know, Margaret, I know, but she's Lucas's wife. What can we do?" The question hung in the air between us, unanswered. We finished our meal in silence, both lost in our thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder if Jenna's behavior was a storm cloud on the horizon, a warning of a tempest yet to come. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Jenna's disrespect go unchallenged any longer. For the sake of my family, I would have to find a way to expose her true nature to Lucas. He deserved to know the kind of person he had married. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my heart. What would this revelation cost us all? This confrontation with Jenna at the cafe was a pivotal moment, the spark that ignited my resolve. It was time for action. But first, I needed proof. I needed to show Lucas not just the disrespect she had shown me, but the full extent of her selfishness and cruelty. And so, my plan began to take shape. The sound of laughter and the clinking of coffee cups often take me back to when Arthur and I first met, in a small cafe not unlike the one Jenna and I had just left. It was a simpler time, a moment in my life filled with hope and the sweet promise of new love. I remember when this cafe was just a bookstore. Arthur mentioned one lazy Sunday afternoon, our hands entwined across the table. "It's where I bought your first birthday present." I smiled, the memory bright in my mind. A collection of poems. "You said it was because every time we talked, it felt like poetry." Arthur chuckled, a sound that warmed my heart. "And you told me it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given you." Those early days were filled with such tenderness, a stark contrast to the tension that now threaded through our daily lives. Jenna's presence in our family had brought strife where there once was harmony. Our son Lucas, once so vibrant and full of life, had grown quieter, more withdrawn. I often wondered if he sensed the growing storm, if he saw the cracks in the facade of his marriage. "Dinner's ready," I called out one evening, breaking the silence that had settled in our home. Lucas and Jenna joined us at the table, the air thick with unspoken words. As we ate, I tried to steer the conversation towards happier times, hoping to bridge the gap that had formed between us. "Do you remember the trip we took to the lake house?" I asked, looking towards Lucas. "You caught your first fish, and you were so proud." Lucas smiled, a flicker of the son I knew. "Yeah, I remember. Jenna, you would have loved it. The lake was so peaceful." Jenna, uninterested, barely looked up from her plate. Sounds boring. I prefer the city. More to do, more to see. Arthur attempted to smooth over the awkward moment. Well, perhaps we can plan a trip to the city then. Make some new memories. Jenna scoffed. With what money? You know Lucas and I are saving up, unless of course you're offering to pay for it. The blatant rudeness of her remark left me speechless. Lucas, too, seemed taken aback, but he said nothing, a silence that spoke volumes. Arthur, ever the peacemaker, simply nodded. We'll see what we can do. The meal ended quickly after that, the unspoken tension finally breaking as Jenna excused herself, claiming a headache. As the dishes were cleared away, Lucas lingered at the table, a rare moment alone with his father and me. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry about Jenna. She's been under a lot of stress lately, he said, his voice low. We understand, Lucas, but it's important she respects your family, Arthur replied, his tone firm yet gentle. Lucas nodded, a troubled look on his face. I know. I'll talk to her. But as he left the room, I couldn't help but wonder if words would be enough to mend what had been broken. Jenna's disdain for our way of life, her blatant disrespect for the values we held dear, had driven a wedge between us all. It was clear that something had to change. I could no longer sit back and watch as Jenna tore our family apart with her selfishness and greed. The question was, how could I protect my family from the storm that was Jenna, without losing them in the process? As I pondered this, I realized the answer lay in the past. Just as Arthur and I had built our family on a foundation of love and understanding, so too would we need to return to those values to save it. But first, Jenna's true nature had to be exposed, and for that I would need to be patient, watchful, and above all, clever. Arthur's workshop was his sanctuary, a place where he retreated to craft and repair, a hobby that brought him peace. It was there I found him, sanding down a piece of oak that would soon become a bookshelf for our living room. Arthur, we need to talk about Jenna, I began, my tone more serious than I intended. He paused, looking up with a sigh. What's she done now? It's not just one thing. It's everything. Her demands, her disrespect. It's like she's testing us, seeing how much she can get away with. Arthur set down his tools, giving me his full attention. I know, Margaret. It's been hard on all of us, but what can we do? Lucas loves her. But at what cost? I countered. We taught Lucas to be kind, to be generous. But Jenna, she takes advantage of those qualities. And it's not just us. I've heard things from the neighbors, from friends. She's not just unkind to us. Arthur nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. What do you suggest we do? We need evidence, something to show Lucas, to make him see her for what she truly is. And how do you propose we do that? I'm not sure yet, but I'll find a way. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. Jenna's birthday was approaching, and despite everything, we decided to throw her a small party. It was a chance to extend an olive branch, perhaps mend some fences. The day of the party, Jenna arrived late, her entrance grandiose and unapologetic. Sorry I'm late, but you know, the salon had a long wait. You don't mind, do you? Her tone was flippant, her attitude dismissive, as if our efforts meant nothing. The guests shifted uncomfortably, the air thick with tension. As the evening progressed, Jenna's true nature began to show. She criticized the food, the decorations, even the guests. Is this the best wine you could afford? I would have expected something nicer from Lucas's parents. Her words were like daggers, and I saw the hurt in Arthur's eyes. This was his breaking point. Jenna, we've welcomed you into our home, into our family. Your words, your actions, they hurt us. Is this how you treat family? Jenna laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Oh, please, you're just too sensitive. I'm just being honest. Someone has to be. The room fell silent, the guests witnessing the unraveling of a family. It was then I realized this was the evidence we needed. Not through hidden means, but in plain sight. Jenna had exposed herself. As the party ended and the guests left, Lucas approached us. His face was a mix of embarrassment and apology. Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Lucas. We're your family. We just want what's best for you, Arthur said, his voice steady. But I knew it wasn't enough. Seeing and acknowledging Jenna's behavior was one thing, taking action was another. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind raced with plans and possibilities. Jenna's behavior at the party was just the tip of the iceberg. To protect Lucas, to save our family, I needed more than just words. I needed a plan. a way to expose Jenna's greed and selfishness once and for all. And as dawn broke, a plan began to take shape. A plan that would require patience, precision, and a bit of subterfuge. Jenna had shown her true colors, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The morning of our anniversary, Arthur and I woke to a silence that hung between us like a heavy curtain. Today marked 40 years of marriage, a milestone we had once looked forward to celebrating with joy and festivity, yet the anticipation that should have filled our home was tainted by the dread of Jenna's latest charade. "I can't believe we agreed to this," I murmured as we sat at the kitchen table, our coffee growing cold between us. Arthur, looking tired and worn, simply nodded. "Let's just get through tonight, for Lucas." The doorbell rang, disrupting the quiet. Jenna stood at the doorstep, dressed flamboyantly, as if the evening was about her. "Ready for your big surprise?" she chimed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. The drive to the restaurant was filled with Jenna's chatter about everything and nothing. Lucas was silent, a tightness around his eyes. Upon arrival, the extravagance of the venue took my breath away. It was the kind of place Arthur and I would never choose for ourselves, preferring the comfort of familiarity over opulence. Jenna's choice was a clear statement, a display of her control over Lucas and, by extension, us. The meal was an array of dishes we had never heard of, each more elaborate than the last. Jenna basked in the luxury, commenting on the quality of the food, the service, the ambiance, as if to remind us of our ordinary lives. As the evening drew to a close and the waiter placed the bill on the table, Jenna's act reached its climax. "Oh dear, I seem to have forgotten my purse." "How clumsy of me," she said, her voice dripping with feigned distress. The silence that followed was palpable. Arthur reached for the bill, resignation in his every move. But this time, I felt a spark of defiance ignite within me. "No, Arthur. Let's see how this plays out," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Jenna's eyes flicked between us, her mask slipping. "Well, Lucas, looks like you'll have to cover this one. I'll pay you back, I promise." Lucas, finally breaking his silence, looked at Jenna with a dawning realization. "This was supposed to be your gift to them, Jenna. Why would you invite us here without planning to pay?" Jenna's facade crumbled, revealing the selfishness beneath. "I just thought, it's your parents. You wouldn't want them to think we're cheap, right?" The ride home was a quiet storm. Lucas was lost in thought, Jenna sullen and silent. Arthur and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement that this was the beginning of the end. The next morning, Lucas came to our house alone. The lines on his face spoke of a sleepless night, of decisions made and yet to be enacted. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry about last night. About everything," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've been blind, but I see now. Jenna's not the person I thought she was." Arthur and I listened as Lucas spoke of his plans, of the conversations he needed to have with Jenna, of the changes that were coming. It was a moment of bitter victory, the truth laid bare at a cost we had never wished to pay. As Lucas left, promising to keep us informed, Arthur and I sat in the quiet aftermath. The truth about Jenna was out, but the path ahead was uncertain. Our family was fractured, and the journey to healing would be long and fraught with difficulty. But in that moment, there was also a sense of relief. The pretense was gone, the lies exposed, and in their place stood the possibility of a future built on honesty, respect, and love. A future where our family could once again find peace. The days following the disastrous anniversary dinner were marked by an uneasy silence. Lucas had confronted Jenna, leading to arguments that echoed through their home, reaching us in hushed, pained recounts from our son. It was during this tumultuous time that Jenna, perhaps in an attempt to mend fences or, more likely, to salvage her tarnished image, extended an olive branch in the form of a shopping trip. "Costco's opening a new store nearby," Jenna announced over a rare family dinner at our place. "Why don't we all go?" "My treat." Arthur and I exchanged wary glances. Lucas looked from Jenna to us, a silent plea in his eyes. Reluctantly, we agreed. The morning of the trip, Jenna arrived with an air of forced cheerfulness. "Ready for some shopping fun?" she chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The store was a bustling hive of activity, with shoppers maneuvering their carts like contestants in an obstacle course. Jenna, with a zeal that seemed genuine, filled our cart with an assortment of goods, from bulk packages of paper towels to gourmet cheeses. As we approached the checkout, Jenna's demeanor shifted subtly. She began fidgeting, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. Then, with a casualness that was too deliberate, she murmured, "Oh, I think I left my phone in the car. Be right back." Arthur and I stood in line, the cart between us, a monument to Jenna's extravagance. Minutes ticked by, and Jenna did not return. As we reached the cashier, the realization dawned on us with the clarity of a cloudless sky. Jenna had no intention of paying. The cashier, a young woman with a polite smile, scanned the items one by one, the total climbing with each beep. Arthur reached for his wallet, but I placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Wait," I said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. This was supposed to be Jenna's treat. Let's not take that away from her. The line behind us grew restless, murmurs of impatience filling the air. Lucas, caught between loyalty to his mother and the wife he was beginning to see through, looked at me with wide, understanding eyes. "I'll go find her," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. But Arthur and I knew there was no point. Jenna had made her play, and it was time for us to make ours. "We'll just buy what we came for," I told the cashier, removing the majority of Jenna's selections from the cart, leaving only a few essentials. When Jenna finally reappeared, her phone conspicuously in hand, the deed was done. Our message was clear. We would no longer be manipulated or taken advantage of. "Where'd everything go?" Jenna asked, feigning confusion. "We thought it best to only buy what we needed," Arthur replied, his voice calm but firm. Jenna's facade cracked, her frustration visible for a brief moment before she regained her composure. "Well, I guess that makes sense. Ready to go?" But as we left Costco, the divide between us was wider than the aisles of the warehouse store. Jenna had shown her true colors once again, and this time we had called her bluff. The ride home was a silent testament to shifting dynamics within our family. Lucas, once blind to Jenna's manipulations, now saw her with new clarity. And for Arthur and me, it was a confirmation of our resolve to protect our family, no matter the cost. Jenna's attempt at reconciliation had backfired, exposing her selfishness further and pushing Lucas closer to a decision we all knew was inevitable. The end of their marriage loomed on the horizon, a painful but necessary conclusion to a union built on deceit. The weeks following the Costco debacle were tense. Jenna's facade of the doting daughter-in-law had shattered completely, her true nature exposed not just to us, but to Lucas as well. It was during this time of silent battles and unspoken grievances that the final act of Jenna's charade came to light. Lucas came to us one evening, a look of determination set upon his features that I hadn't seen in years. "I need to talk to you both," he began, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that lay beneath. "What is it, Lucas?" Arthur asked, concern evident in his voice. "It's about Jenna and me. I've decided to file for divorce." The words hung in the air, a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that Lucas had finally seen the truth, sorrow for the pain that truth had caused him. "Lucas, are you sure?" I asked, needing to hear the words from him to understand his decision fully. "Yes, I'm sure. After everything that's happened, after all the lies and manipulation, I can't see any other way. I don't know who she is anymore," he replied, the finality in his voice leaving no room for doubt. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and quiet heartbreak. Jenna, caught off guard by Lucas's decisiveness, oscillated between pleading for reconciliation and lashing out in anger. "You can't do this to me, Lucas, after everything I've done for you," she screamed during one of her tirades, her voice echoing through the halls of their once shared home. "Everything you've done? Jenna, you've lied, manipulated, and hurt everyone around you, including yourself." "This is the only way," Lucas responded, his resolve unwavering. It was amidst this chaos that Jenna's true machinations came to light. Items from our home, precious family heirlooms, had gone missing over the months. Jenna had taken them, selling them off to fund her extravagant lifestyle. The revelation came as a shock, not just to us, but to the community at large. "You were stealing from us?" Arthur confronted Jenna, disbelief and betrayal written across his face. Jenna's response was cold, devoid of remorse. "I needed the money. You have no idea what it's like, living with your expectations, your judgments. But to steal? To betray your family?" I couldn't hide the disgust in my voice, the realization of Jenna's actions cutting deep. Lucas, standing by our side, looked at Jenna with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "It's over, Jenna. You need to leave." And leave she did, her departure marked not by tearful goodbyes, but by a silent acknowledgement of the destruction she had wrought. Jenna's fall from grace was swift, the community shunning her for her deceit and theft. In the end, Lucas was granted a divorce and full custody of their child, the court recognizing the toxicity of Jenna's influence. The house that once echoed with the sounds of a seemingly happy family now stood as a testament to the price of dishonesty and manipulation. As Arthur and I watched Lucas rebuild his life, our hearts ached for the pain he had endured. But there was also hope, a belief that out of the ashes of this ordeal, a stronger, wiser Lucas had emerged. The fall of Jenna served as a harsh reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of selfishness. But it also reaffirmed the strength of our family, bound not by blood alone, but by the unwavering support and love we shared. In the quiet after the storm, as we gathered around the dinner table, a sense of peace settled over us. Jenna's shadow no longer loomed large in our lives. We were free to move forward, to heal, and to cherish the bonds that had weathered the tempest of betrayal. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family, stronger and more united than ever. The dust had settled in the weeks following Jenna's departure. Our home, once a battleground of wills and wits, had returned to its former state of warmth and peace. Lucas, having weathered the storm of his broken marriage, found solace in the company of family, his resilience a testament to the strength we knew he always possessed. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, the air filled with the light laughter of recovery and the soothing silence of shared experiences, Lucas spoke up, his voice carrying a new depth of wisdom. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, catching our attentive gazes, "about Jenna, about us, and about what I want moving forward." Arthur and I exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. We had been through the ringer, but we were here, together, and that was what mattered. "Lucas, whatever you decide, know that we're here for you. Always," I said, my voice steady, imbued with the unconditional support that had been the cornerstone of our family. Lucas nodded, a small smile gracing his lips. "I know, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. After everything, I've realized just how important family is, how important honesty and integrity are." The room fell into a contemplative silence, each of us lost in our thoughts, reflecting on the trials that had brought us to this moment of unity and understanding. It's been a hard lesson, but I'm grateful for it, for the clarity it's brought me, and for the chance to start anew. With your help, I want to be a better man, a better father, Lucas continued, his gaze firm and resolute. Arthur leaned forward, placing a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Son, you've always been those things. Jenna, she was a storm that threatened to take everything we held dear, but we weathered it together, and will continue to do so, no matter what comes our way." The affirmation was a balm to the wounds left by Jenna's betrayal, a promise of continual support and love. As the night drew on, we talked about the future, about the lessons learned and the paths yet to be taken. Lucas spoke of his hopes for his child, of building a life marked by the values we had always cherished. And as I looked around at my family, at the faces marked by trials yet shining with an unbreakable bond, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Jenna's deceit had brought pain and upheaval, but it had also brought us closer, strengthening our resolve and our commitment to each other. In the end, Jenna's downfall was not just a tale of retribution, but a catalyst for growth and renewal. Her actions, so fraught with selfishness and malice, had unwittingly sown the seeds of her own undoing, leaving in their wake a family more united and resilient than ever before. As we said our goodnights, retreating to the comfort of our beds, I couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future. Jenna had been a dark chapter in our lives, but her story was over. Now it was time to turn the page, to begin anew with the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family forged in the fires of adversity, but emerging stronger, wiser, and infinitely more loving.
Kevin and Brian, though they were our sons, grew very close to Lisa. She misled them with lies, causing them to ignore us. After Lisa, Kevin, and Brian were asked to leave our home, my husband Michael suddenly passed away. When I told Kevin about his father's death over the phone, his reaction shocked me. He said, "Your dad passed away. You handled the funeral, Mom. I don't want to see the face of someone who kicked us out. We're having a great time here, so don't bother us. Just tell the relatives we can't come because of work or something." I was speechless. A week after the funeral, I got a letter from Michael addressed to me. He wrote, "Please read this without our sons knowing." As I read, I was filled with emotion. Lisa had caused so much trouble in our family, and Kevin and Brian didn't even come to their father's funeral. I couldn't let it end this way. My name is Olivia. I'm 56 years old, a housewife, and I also work full-time. I met Michael at a party for new employees at our related companies. I'm not much of a drinker, but I couldn't turn down the drinks I was offered and ended up feeling very sick. I was sitting in a corner looking for a chance to leave when Michael noticed me. He started talking to me and even arranged a taxi for me later. I took a day off to thank him, and at his office, he was surprised to see me but pleased. We became friends, started dating, and eventually got married. We both longed for a warm family life. Michael had a tough upbringing, and I lost my parents when I was young. We believed we could be happy together, but living with each other brought unexpected challenges, mostly because of Michael's sister, Lisa. Before the wedding, I tried to meet her, but she was too busy. Our first meeting was at the wedding. Michael's parents had passed away, so it was a simple ceremony with just friends and relatives. Lisa drew attention in many ways. She wore a pure white dress that was quite revealing, heavy makeup like a stage actress, and lots of perfume. I tried not to show how upset I was, but Lisa either noticed or just didn't like me from the start. She didn't say hello and made fun of me. She said to Michael, "Couldn't you find someone better at your workplace?" Having such a plain sister-in-law is embarrassing. But maybe she suits you, Mr. Super Serious. Michael looked like he wanted to argue, but a fight on our wedding day seemed like a bad sign. I said, "I'm fine, let's go get ready." I forced a smile and led Michael away. That was our awful first impression, but I didn't worry too much, thinking we would only see Lisa at family gatherings now and then. However, things changed dramatically. Soon after a short marriage, Lisa moved in with us because of her husband's cheating. She said, "My ex left, and I want to move out too." Our parents sold their place when I got married, so I can't go back to my parents' house. Can I stay at Michael's place for a while? Michael was clearly annoyed and said, "Why don't you rent an apartment? You got plenty of alimony, right? Just let me stay until I find a nice place." I want to take my time, not settle for a rundown house. But in the end, Lisa just showed up with her stuff and moved in without asking. The main issue was Lisa didn't seem to realize we were taking care of her. She acted like it was her own house, which was very stressful for Michael and me. Lisa would go out every night, sleep until the afternoon, and then spend the day lounging on the living room sofa, playing with her phone or just watching TV. This was her routine until she went out again after dinner. Sometimes I took a day off and stayed home, so I saw this was what she did every day. When I came home tired in the evening after working all day, Lisa would ask in a complaining tone, "Hey, is dinner ready yet?" "How long until it's done?" I would say, "In about 15 minutes." She would reply, "That long? Hurry up, will you?" She also made rude comments about my cleaning, saying things like, "You're not very good at this," or "You're cutting corners." I share the cleaning duties with Michael. He's tired too. Lisa told me. As a wife, you should be doing all the household chores. I didn't want to complain to Michael about Lisa because I didn't want to ruin their relationship as siblings. But he noticed that I was becoming unhappy. When Michael asked me about it and I told him about Lisa's behavior, he got really angry. He told Lisa, "Don't overstep your boundaries. You're just a guest here." But Lisa just shrugged and said, "I'm just stating the obvious," and refused to help pay for household expenses. She said, "I'm still in shock from my husband's cheating. How can I work in this state? And you want to charge me? I can afford to pay for clothes and go out drinking." Lisa's attitude made both Michael and me very upset. My dream of a happy married life was turning into a nightmare because of her. Michael and I wanted to have kids soon, but it seemed like the stress over Lisa was getting in the way. We were even thinking about getting medical checks when I found out I was pregnant. In our 6 years of marriage, we were so happy and cried tears of joy. Michael saw this as a chance to suggest Lisa move out. He told her, "We're going to need more space when the baby comes. Maybe it's time you move to your own place." Then Lisa asked me, "What do you plan to do about work?" I said, "I plan to return to work after a year of parental leave." She offered, "Well, I can look after the baby. But we plan to use daycare." I checked around and found out that all the daycares, even the unlicensed ones, had long waiting lists. A few months later, as my belly began to show, Lisa said confidently, "I'll take care of the baby until you get a daycare spot. I owe you, and I'll do it for free. It'll be tough on your finances if you quit your job." After discussing it, Michael and I reluctantly agreed to let Lisa help. I was very worried, but to my surprise, Lisa took excellent care of our newborn Kevin. She learned about childcare online, prepared his meals, and even took him to parks and community centers. She was so dedicated to Kevin, and it showed in how much he adored her. Even when our second son, Brian, was born 3 years later, Lisa's care didn't change. With Michael and me busy at work, we were thankful for her help with the kids. But as the boys grew older, they started to avoid us more. When we suggested going to the amusement park or having a barbecue for Brian's birthday, they would say, "Lisa already took us to a fancy place," or "We're going with Lisa to a high-end sushi restaurant." It was hard for Michael and me to see how excited they were about spending time with Lisa. Even after Kevin and Brian started elementary school, they preferred being with Lisa. Even on weekends, they barely talked to us and acted like we weren't important, spending all their time playing games or going out with her. Things got even worse as Kevin got older. He openly showed he didn't like us, ignored us, and even made rude noises when we tried to talk to him. Once, when I told him not to eat while playing on his phone, he snapped at me, "Shut up, old lady." I was shocked to hear him say it. Would have been great if Lisa was our mom. She gives us money and takes us places. The boys even said being born to us was a mistake, and that they heard from Lisa we didn't really want kids. That hurt a lot. I calmly explained that Lisa, while not working and just living off her alimony, wasn't contributing financially. Kevin dreamily said, "Lisa's lifestyle is something to aspire to," and added, "But she raised us right. Complaining about her seems weird." They even questioned if we wanted kids at all, believing Lisa's claim that we had them just out of obligation, which was not true. Michael and I always wanted kids, and Lisa had only offered to help until we found daycare. I was very upset and couldn't believe what Kevin was saying to me. He smirked when he saw how upset I was and said, "You guys are always so annoying, telling us to do homework and that we play too many games." Lisa says it's fine not to do homework and even stays up playing games with us until morning. I snapped back, "Lisa isn't responsible for your future. Your dad and I tell you these things because we care about you, even if it means you might hate us." "Yeah, right. You're just jealous because we're close to Lisa. How dumb. Maybe you shouldn't have let her take care of us. I felt like crying. When I looked up, I saw Michael at the doorway, his fist shaking. He asked, "Who do you think you're talking to?" "Oh, hey, Dad. Working late again today." Must be tough with such a small salary. The boys laughed mockingly, leaving Michael speechless. "Finally, you talked to us and it. Just to mock your parents," Michael shouted. "Stop being so loud," Lisa called out as she came downstairs to the kitchen, looking annoyed. "Getting worked up over what kids say is so immature." "It's because you spoil them that they're like this," Michael yelled. "I've had enough. Get out now." "What, I've been nice to my nephews, and this is the thanks I get." "If you're going to stay, then pay your way," Michael said. Lisa puffed up her cheeks and finally agreed. "Fine, I'll leave." "Happy now?" "Lisa, you're really leaving?" I asked. "No way," Lisa replied defiantly. But Lisa quickly went to her room, packed her things in a suitcase, and came down to the entrance. "I've put my clothes in boxes. I've arranged for movers this weekend." "Leave it until then, okay, Lisa." "Are you really going?" "Yes, take care." She smiled at Kevin and Brian as they saw her off to the gate. Then she left, but it was too late to fix the relationship between us and our sons. As teenagers, Kevin and Brian became more rebellious. Kevin quit his job within a month after finishing high school, and 1 year later, Brian quit his job after just a few days. They talked about starting a business together and made some questionable deals, spending their money from odd jobs in one night. After a big argument, Michael kicked them out of the house. "When you get a job, come back." No way will it ever come back to this place. And so Lisa, who had caused so much trouble in our family, and the son she influenced, Kevin and Brian, left. It was back to just my husband and me. I was worried about how Kevin and Brian were doing, but without the four of them causing chaos, I felt relieved. At the end of the year, just as I was about to leave work and head home, I got a call from Michael's colleague. "Are you Olivia?" Michael collapsed at work. He's currently in the ICU at the city hospital. I said I would be there right away. I tried to stay calm and drove to the hospital. At the ICU, I waited in the hallway until the doors opened and a doctor in a white coat came out. He looked sad as he told me, "We did our best, but I'm sorry." I was too shocked to speak. That morning, Michael had left for work as usual. We had talked about keeping our schedule open for our anniversary next month. Sure, the usual restaurant. I have a surprise planned for this year. I never thought that would be our last conversation. Everything felt gray and meaningless as I stood there. I decided to contact Kevin, Brian, and Lisa to tell them Michael had passed away. I left a voicemail and sent a message. That night, Kevin called back. I could hear music and laughter in the background. As I tried to tell him about his father, my voice shook. Kevin laughed and said, "The funeral and stuff, I'll leave it to you, Mom. I don't want to see the face of someone who kicked us out. We're having fun here, so don't bother us." I could hear Lisa chuckling in the background. "Just tell the relatives we're absent because of work. Say hi to them for us." I stood in shock for a while, holding the phone. Were these really Michael's sons and sisters? Feeling empty, I knew I had to go ahead with the funeral arrangements. I got in touch with Michael's family and the funeral home we usually use to arrange a family funeral. Saying goodbye so suddenly didn't feel real, and I didn't cry during the funeral. But as everyday life continued, the pain of losing Michael kept hitting me. While making dinner, setting up to record a TV show we watched together, or making coffee, I'd accidentally make enough for 3 or start talking to him before realizing he was no longer there. That's when I couldn't hold back the tears. A week after Michael passed away, I was watering the flowers when the mailman arrived. I took the mail inside, and among the junk mail, I found an envelope addressed to me. The handwriting was unmistakably Michael's. Overwhelmed with emotion, I opened it. The letter explained that he had asked a friend to send this if something happened to him. After expressing his thanks for our years together, one line stood out, asking me to keep this from our sons. Moved by the letter and realizing how much Michael knew, I worried about the kids. I wiped away my tears and decided to take action. Lisa had hurt our family, and Kevin and Brian hadn't even come to their father's funeral. I was determined not to let it end this way. Michael's letter mentioned a package in a safety deposit box at a bank near the station, and he included a key. I went to the bank, entered the safety deposit box area next to the ATMs, and nervously followed the instructions. I inserted the card, entered the PIN, and a part of the table opened to reveal the safety deposit box Michael had rented. I used the key, found everything Michael mentioned, and took them with me. Later, I invited Lisa, Kevin, and Brian to my house. I decided to share Michael's inheritance with everyone important to him. With the promise of inheritance, Lisa, Kevin, and Brian came quickly. They had skipped the funeral, but were eager for the inheritance, which showed their shamelessness. Lisa couldn't even wait while I was making tea. She blurted out, stingy Michael had an inheritance. Maybe he hid money because he was so stingy. Being stingy might not be so bad after all. I wonder if he put his inheritance in some account. I'm excited. Then she looked at me and smiled. You did the right thing telling your sister-in-law, Mom. Stop beating around the bush. Is Dad's inheritance in jewels? Maybe gold bars. As they all fidgeted, I smiled and said, before that, please listen to this. I put an IC recorder and Michael's cell phone on the dining table, which confused them. Is that Dad's cell phone? And what's this, an IC recorder? The kind used for investigating affairs? I see it on TV. Wait, did Dad have an affair? Kevin laughed mockingly, but his smile vanished when I pressed play. Kevin's voice came through, talking on the phone. Yeah, remember that old lady you met at our house, Lisa? She wears so much makeup and clings to me, calling me Kevin dear. It's gross, but she'll hand over money if you flatter her. There's a use for fools and old ladies. As Kevin froze, Lisa's face filled with anger when the recording stopped. Lisa angrily asked, "What was that, Kevin?" He replied, "I don't know, a stranger maybe, or Dad recorded that voice." Over Lisa's shouted protest, Kevin continued, Michael was too tech illiterate to do something like that. As Lisa and Kevin argued, Brian tried to leave quietly. I quickly played the second recording. How much money did you get from Lisa? $333,000. Damn, I only got $3,000. What did you do? Gave her a bouquet of roses and a high-end bag for her birthday. Maybe I'll give her a fake brand next time. She can't tell the difference. Kevin and Brian laughed, revealing their true colors. She loves getting gifts from men. Even though she's almost 50, she still acts young, falling for every compliment from men she meets at the bar and spending a lot of money on them. She's an easy target, really foolish. The brothers didn't hold back in their ridicule, even mocking her blonde hair and her unrealistic dream of marrying a young Korean pop star, which they found creepy. Amidst Kevin and Brian's laughter, after the recording suddenly stopped, Brian, with a forced smile, defensively muttered, "Man, when did Dad record this and show it to Mom after he's gone? That's just mean." Pretending to be a good guy, but those are the ones you can't trust. Even now, they continued to insult Michael, which made me very angry. Before I could speak, Lisa yelled at them. "You dare mock people. Who do you think raised you since you were kids? Don't mess with me. See, that's what's so annoying about you, always acting like we owe you." They replied, and Kevin and Brian's laughter made Lisa's ears turn red with anger. "Now it's your turn, Lisa, having a favorite bar to go to. That's quite nice, isn't it?" As I reached for the IC recorder, Lisa's face tensed up. Without hesitation, I pressed play. First, lively music and clinking glasses, then Lisa's high-pitched voice came through. "That's right. I've had my nephews wrapped around my finger since they were little. I filled their heads with all sorts of nonsense about their parents. Kids are easy to manipulate. Oh, Lisa, you're so clever," praised the man proudly. Lisa responded, "I'm single. I need them to take care of me in my old age. Look at my nephew, handsome, right? They look like models or pop stars," the man replied, growing more talkative. "I dream of my nephews feeding me, taking me on amusement park dates, even changing my diapers in the future." "Oh wow, going into a facility? No way. If I'm going to be looked after, it's by handsome men only. Can't wait." I stopped the playback and looked at Lisa, with Kevin and Brian's intense gaze upon her. She turned away. So both my brother and his wife had nasty hobbies, recording things secretly. I vented. Around so much, I heard from relatives and got curious. After all, the alimony from your ex-husband should have run out after 24 years, yet you remain unemployed. So I hired a private investigator to look into your background. I explained what had been recorded. "Lisa, you really are quite a character. No, not funny at all, creepy really. What do you think of us?" As the brothers cringed and hugged themselves, Lisa's eyes narrowed in anger. "Shut up. I doled on you, spent my time and money. What's wrong with expecting something in return?" "Oh, you mean this?" I said as I spread a bank book on the table, making Kevin and Brian's eyes light up. "Oh, is this finally the inheritance?" "Well, sort of," I said suggestively, glancing at Lisa, who looked nervous and sweaty, her eyes shifting around as if looking for a way to escape. I turned to Kevin and Brian. "Remember what I told you before? Michael cut ties with his father before we got married. Remember?" Kevin nodded. "Our grandfather, Dad's father, didn't work seriously. He relied on the family fortune and racked up a huge debt," I continued. "That's right," I added. "Michael's mother worked herself to death paying off those debts, right, Lisa?" Lisa nodded. "So the inheritance Michael received from wealthy relatives, he kept it a secret and deposited it in an account for you. We never heard about this. If there was money, why didn't he tell us?" they asked. "He planned to proceed with the inheritance once you started working seriously. But before that, someone used it without permission," I explained. Kevin and Brian turned to look at Lisa. "No way," they said. "Yes," I continued. "Lisa had been taking Michael's bank book and SIL without permission during his lifetime and withdrawing money." Kevin and Brian looked at the bank book, which now showed $300,000 down to $20. "Hey, what did you spend it on?" they demanded. "Well, this guy convinced me there was a great investment opportunity. I thought I could double it and pay it back. I just borrowed it, that's all," Lisa tried to explain as she squirmed under their gaze. Kevin and Brian exploded in anger. "Don't joke. That was supposed to be our money. Just $300,000 and you're making a fuss. Considering the effort I put into raising you, you should be giving it to me for free," Lisa shot back defiantly. This made Kevin and Brian even angrier, their veins popping on their foreheads, looking ready to confront her. But that wasn't all about Lisa. I sighed and spread Kevin and Brian's bank books on the table. "You both started working right after high school, so the college funds were left untouched. I was going to give it to you once you started working seriously, but this too was meddled with, seeing only a few pennies left in their accounts. Kevin tore at his hair in frustration, and Brian almost cried. "Damn it, woman, what you're doing is criminal." "Yeah, we'll sue you," they threatened. "Don't be silly, it's called family theft and doesn't count as a crime when done by a relative," Lisa replied, crossing her arms and legs and laughing annoyingly. "I'll pay it back someday, maybe in the next life." "You could be charged for it," I said. At my words, Lisa's eyes widened in shock. "Huh. Indeed, relatives living together can't be charged for crimes, which is why Michael kicked you out," I continued. "Planning to report you?" Dumbfounded, Lisa asked in disbelief. "You betrayed your husband's sister." "Well, yes, that's what happened," I confirmed. "Really? Unbelievable. After all I've done for you, how ungrateful," Lisa complained. "Who's ungrateful here?" I yelled back, silencing the room. I glared straight at Lisa, unleashing my fury. "Because of you, our family is a mess. It's beyond repair. What are you going to do about it?" "Overreacting much." Lisa shrugged. "I should have never trusted you and kicked you out sooner," I said. Then Lisa turned to Kevin and Brian, spreading a sinister smile across her face. "I wanted to be a mom, huh? Since I couldn't become one, I thought I'd take your mom away from you too." Kevin and Brian looked terrified. "Are you okay in the head? Just stay away from me for good," Kevin said. "That's a problem." "I came today to borrow money from you," Lisa smirked. "We're family," she said, "so we should help each other in times of need, right?" "Yeah, right, Mom." Suddenly Kevin and Brian, who had been furious moments ago, put on a smile. "Actually, we're broke too. Got fired for talking back at work, for taking a little unscheduled break," they said arrogantly. Brian and Kevin complained bitterly. I felt a headache coming on. "Getting fired is what you deserve, huh?" "Yeah, we got kicked out of our apartment," Kevin casually revealed. "Didn't pay the rent, so we'll stay here for a while." "That's okay, right? And cover our debts once we're debt-free, we'll start working seriously. Can't you lend us about $60,000? "You're working, after all." Faced with their brazen request, I was stunned. I felt a surge of anger. Don't mess around. I have nothing to lend to sons who skipped their father's funeral. I refused strongly. But they kept asking, "Please, Mom, if you keep this up, I'll report you to the police too. Don't ever set foot in this house again." Just then, a police car siren stopped in front of the house. Lisa, trying to escape in a panic, ran into the police officers at the front door and was quietly taken away. "Damn, are we going to get arrested too?" "Let's just get out of here for now," Kevin and Brian said. They glanced at me, standing firm, gave up on asking for money, and left. Kevin and Brian, realizing that the money Lisa had given them came from Michael and their own savings, seemed to have finally lost all affection for Lisa. "I don't want to end up like them," they said, seemingly deciding to work seriously. However, their laziness didn't disappear overnight. They kept calling me. "Mom, I'm being pressed for payments at the bar. Can you lend me some money?" "I blew it all on horse racing. Can you lend me about $200,000? I got so annoyed that I blocked their contact information. Later, they tried to ask other relatives for money, but were shunned and denounced as heartless for not attending their father's funeral, leading to estrangement. Eventually, pursued by debt collectors for borrowing from shady sources, Kevin and Brian woke up and started working seriously. However, they had racked up so much debt that they were banned from the nightclub and bars where they were regulars. Now shunned even at their favorite drinking spots, they complained, "We've lost all the fun in our lives." Lisa, being a first offender, paid a fine and was released quickly. However, the incident led to her being dumped by her boyfriend. Moreover, after repaying the embezzled money from Michael's, Kevin's, and Brian's accounts, she ended up with a huge debt. Lisa now works from early morning till late at night, looking exhausted. What I kept secret from Lisa and my sons was that Michael had left another item in the safe, a large pink diamond necklace, a prestigious heirloom passed down from his mother. As mentioned in his letter, it was intended as a gift for our 34th wedding anniversary next year. Fearing it might be found and sold by Lisa or my sons, Michael had kept it in the safe. When appraised, it was valued at $360,000. To my astonishment, I wouldn't sell it. It's a treasured gift from Michael. Although I hoped for a warm family, things didn't go as planned with my sons, and I lost my husband too. But Michael's memory is still alive in my heart. Moving forward, I want to live strong and cherish the memories of Michael. One day, my husband casually asked about our finances, wondering how much money we actually have in our safe. I laughed and guessed probably around $700,000 in total. However, the very next day when I returned home, I found a signed divorce document on the living room table. Both my husband and the safe had disappeared. My name is Olivia, and at 56 years old, I am a hardworking housewife who still puts in diligent hours at my job. My passion for saving money was instilled early by my mother, who opened a savings account for me when I was a child. She taught me that each deposit would make the balance in my bank book grow, an idea I found incredibly appealing. Starting with just $1, I was thrilled to see my savings increase bit by bit as the interest accumulated, even if it was just a few cents each year. This early joy blossomed into a lifelong love for finance, guiding me to a career as a financial planner specializing in asset management. During college, a friend came to me with news about an old childhood friend, Scott, who was struggling with gambling debts and the financial burdens left by his parents. Intrigued, I agreed to meet Scott to offer some guidance. He was a charming man with an engaging smile. Despite his financial woes, there was something quite endearing about his troubled look. At my friend's urging, I helped him out, little knowing that this would lead to a complex series of events. Looking back, I might have had a small crush on Scott, but I could never have predicted the twists and turns that followed. I suggested he consolidate his debts and lower his monthly payments to get his finances back on track. Soon after, Scott and I began dating despite my friend's warnings against it. We pressed on and eventually married. This decision would lead to unexpected challenges and dramatic changes in my life. I firmly believed that marrying Scott would enable us to tackle his family's financial issues together. Even though I had a stable income for someone my age, most of Scott's earnings went towards clearing his existing debts. I urged him to cut financial ties with his parents to avoid further debt accumulation. To help manage his expenses, I provided Scott with a monthly allowance of $2,000. When Scott decided to sever these financial dependencies, his decision was met with outrage from his mother, who berated him as an ungrateful son. His father also criticized me, labeling me a thieving cat. Exhausted by the constant pressure of his parents' debts, Scott finally reached his breaking point. He firmly told them he wasn't just an ATM, and that he was doing his best to manage his own life. He returned to me relieved to be free from the recurring arguments about money with his parents. Shortly after, we were blessed with the arrival of our son, Gary, a handsome boy who was the spitting image of his father, and quickly became my pride and joy. As Gary grew, it became apparent that he had inherited some of Scott's traits, like his lack of discipline and indecisiveness. Over the years, Scott struggled with borrowing money from predatory lenders, dealing with loan sharks, and occasionally manipulating friends into lending him money for gambling. Despite these challenges, I managed to keep him on the right track. After 23 years, we had managed to reduce his debt to about $113,000, nearing full repayment. However, a significant turning point occurred when Scott received a call that his father had collapsed and was hospitalized. Scott left work early and sent me a message apologizing for breaking our promise to avoid contact with his parents. He explained that his father had suffered a minor stroke. While it wasn't life-threatening, it was serious enough that he should not overexert himself. Scott expressed his desire to stay with his parents for a while to offer support during this difficult time. Despite my offer to join him, Scott insisted that I stay focused on my work and avoid the potential mistreatment from his parents. This decision marked a poignant moment in our lives as we navigated the complexities of family obligations and personal commitments. I had provided Scott with some extra funds to help with hospital visits, anticipating that his parents might be struggling with medical bills. Since then, Scott began visiting his parents more often, each visit costing between $450 to $650 from my pocket. It appeared that my in-laws were facing financial hardships and depended on Scott for support. Though these amounts added up to roughly $3,200 to $3,800 each month, I decided to ignore it for the time being. A year had elapsed since my father-in-law's health scare, and both in-laws had visibly aged. I felt they needed someone to support them during this challenging time. As for me, my perennial hobby was always about saving money. One day, while I was pulling out my bank book from the safe with a smile, Scott, who usually paid little attention to my financial habits, curiously asked, "Hey, how much money do we actually have in that bank account you always look at so happily?" I casually replied, "It's about $700,000 now." However, the following morning, I discovered divorce papers on the living room table, and both Scott and the safe had disappeared. At breakfast, despite the shock, I couldn't help but smile, realizing Scott had been eyeing the money in the safe. Moreover, he had planned to take the entire safe with him. Although not the sharpest tool in the shed, the thought of him trying to physically carry the entire safe almost made me burst out laughing. In our home, we have a red cat named Bella, and we installed a pet camera to watch her adorable antics, which brought joy to my days. During lunch breaks, I would tune in to watch the camera, finding delight in Bella's endearing behavior. One day, as I turned on the camera, an unexpected scene unfolded in our living room. On a weekday, my in-laws and my husband Scott were having a surprising conversation. They marveled at the nice house Scott was living in and praised what they thought was his excellent salary. Scott's father, with a hint of pride, mentioned his own decent earnings, but lamented that I controlled it, leaving him with just a $2,000 allowance. They comforted Scott, suggesting he deserved more and subtly hinting that he was being shortchanged by me. This revelation was startling and shed new light on the dynamics within our family. It seemed as though Scott, influenced by his parents, had forgotten all about the hard work I had put into managing his debts. He nodded in agreement with his parents, seemingly oblivious to the sacrifices I had made on his behalf. I wondered what thoughts were running through their minds. In the past, Scott had been overwhelmed by debts from his parents, obligated to hand over cash every month, which made it hard for him to manage his own finances. Now he was complaining that it wasn't fair for him to receive only $1,000 a month, especially when his wife had substantial savings in the bank. As Scott aired his grievances, my in-laws' eyes sparkled eagerly, exchanging glances as they awaited his reaction. "How much is in that bank account of yours?" They prodded, leaning forward with anticipation. Last I checked, I think it was around $510,000, or maybe $610,000, Scott responded vaguely. They pressed further, questioning whether that money rightfully belonged to him. Despite the considerable effort I had invested in reducing his debt from nearly $430,000 to just $115,000, it seemed that Scott's perspective had been swayed by his parents. His easygoing and indecisive nature, despite his charm, led him to side with their views. Witnessing this conversation through the pet camera, with my hard-earned savings potentially at risk, left me utterly devastated. Tears streamed down my face. As I sat at my work desk, watching the scene unfold on my phone, I had been diligently managing our living expenses from Scott's income, allocating most of it to repaying his debts. The realization that all the efforts to secure our financial future were being undermined by his parents' manipulation was heart-wrenching. Despite providing Scott with a $1,000 monthly allowance from my own earnings and explaining this arrangement to him, it seemed as if he had forgotten everything. Over the past 23 years, I had given myself to him unreservedly, but the current circumstances left me feeling desolate and pitiful. My heart ached as though I was drowning in my own sorrow, and I felt as if I was on the verge of breaking. Nevertheless, I made sure to record their conversation and sent the footage to my son. Overwhelmed by the emotional strain, I left work early that day, seeking solace at my usual bar, where I shared my woes with the bartender. His gentle words of comfort helped me, and in that moment, any lingering affection and intoxication for my husband dissipated. I expressed my thanks to the bartender and looked forward to a more hopeful encounter in the future. After leaving the bar, I returned home with renewed determination. In my study, I contemplated how to retrieve the bank book that was hidden inside the safe. A daunting task, but I was ready to devise a plan to prove that underestimating me was their mistake. It was clear that gathering evidence was the first crucial step. I diligently monitored the pet camera daily, and to my dismay, more unsettling truths began to emerge. My husband was bringing a young woman into our home during what were supposed to be his work hours, treating her as if she were a regular guest approximately 2 times a week. Witnessing my husband's infidelity crushed any remaining desire for tranquility. During moments watching our cat Bella, who also seemed distressed, and began to avoid the area, this betrayal not only ruined my cherished relaxation time, but was also an unforgivable act of deceit. Determined to seek justice, I vowed to take stern action against them. One day, while monitoring the pet camera from work, I discovered it wasn't just the young woman causing trouble. My in-laws had returned to our house. I overheard them plotting. "Is everything arranged to take that bank book from Olivia?" They asked each other with sly grins. This revelation fueled my resolve. I was more determined than ever to protect my interests and show them that I was not someone to be trifled with. The next steps were clear: safeguard my assets and confront the betrayal head-on. I responded with confidence when my father-in-law expressed concern about the weight of the safe, offering to help. I assured him that I could handle it. Knowing well that my husband Scott, though handsome, wasn't the sharpest in my heart, I resolved to outmaneuver these people who were scheming at such depths. I imagined using the funds from the bank book to go to a casino as a family and rebuild our lives. Despite a pang of guilt about using Olivia's savings, my in-laws had convinced Scott that their actions were justified for his happiness. They urged him to swiftly divorce the woman he was seeing and leave the divorce papers on the table, eagerly anticipating the money from the bank book and the arrival of his new wife. Scott reluctantly agreed, and their unsettling plan began to unfold. Back at my office desk, sipping coffee, I recorded the scene unfolding on my phone screen. Oddly, I found myself somewhat understanding of their motives, realizing the extent they would go for money. Yet I was no longer upset or sad. Instead, I felt a burning determination to give them a taste of their own medicine. The day finally came when my husband inquired about the money in the passbook kept in the vault. Casually, I informed him that it contained about $500,000. The next day, upon returning home, I discovered signed divorce papers in the living room, and both my husband and the vault were gone. Smirking over breakfast, I acted swiftly. I filed the divorce papers and reached out to my son Gary immediately. "Your father finally took the vault," I told him. "I can't believe he actually managed to carry it. It's so heavy." This ironic twist, while frustrating, was also a vindication of sorts. I was ready to start the next chapter, free from deceit and manipulation. Armed with the truth and a clear conscience, after informing my son Gary about the unfolding situation with my husband Scott, Gary suggested that it might be time to finally cut ties with him. He questioned whether Scott had managed to take everything from the vault. Little did Scott know I had proactively moved all our savings to an online account, making the physical passbook he stole utterly worthless. Gary advised me to consider filing a police report and strongly recommended hiring a competent lawyer. Feeling grateful for his advice, I decided to sever my legal and emotional ties with Scott. I reached out to a lawyer, one who came highly recommended by my trusted private investigator. Exasperated yet determined, I handed over the recordings from our pet camera, which captured all of Scott's and his parents' underhanded discussions and actions. I provided these to both the police and the lawyer, eagerly awaiting their response to the clear evidence of deceit. Shortly after, Scott, in a state of panic, called me. He was frantic, questioning why the passbook was empty and where the $500,000 had gone. I refused to engage with him directly. Calm and collected, I instructed him to communicate through my lawyer if he had any questions or concerns, and then I blocked his number to prevent any further direct contact. I officially reported the incident to the police and provided the same recording to my lawyer, reinforcing the seriousness of the case. Feeling a sense of relief, I allowed myself a moment to reflect. Karma is a real pain, I thought, satisfied with the turn of events and reassured that justice would soon be served. Not long after taking these steps, I received a call from the police. They informed me that they had apprehended Scott, although unfortunately, the vault had been damaged. It appeared that in his desperation, Scott had forced it open, and in a fit of rage upon finding it empty, he or possibly his accomplices had set it on fire. The contents inside, though mostly old papers and some personal effects, were completely destroyed. Despite it being his first criminal offense, the nature of Scott's actions, breaking into a safe, attempted theft, and property damage, meant that he spent several days in police custody. His parents, who were implicated in the planning but not the direct action, were released but given a stern warning by the authorities. After his release, Scott's desperation spiraled further out of control. He broke into our former residence, demanding entry and claiming that everything was just a small prank. He insisted that we were still married, causing a significant scene that alarmed the neighbors and required police intervention once again. This final act of desperation by Scott only underscored the necessity of the precautions I had taken. It was clear that I had made the right decision to protect myself legally and financially. The entire ordeal was emotionally draining, but also a powerful reminder of my own resilience. I had managed to stay one step ahead throughout this tumultuous period, safeguarding not only my financial assets, but also my peace of mind. Now, as I looked forward to a quieter, more stable future, I felt a profound sense of closure and readiness to move forward. The tumult of the past months had been challenging, but reaffirmed my capabilities and strength. I was ready to rebuild, focusing on my well-being and that of my son, free from the deceit and manipulation that had marred my previous life with Scott. After the latest incident involving my ex-husband, I didn't hesitate to act swiftly. I immediately called the police, and he was taken into custody once again. Following this, I contacted my lawyer to begin the legal proceedings necessary to obtain a restraining order against him and to explore the possibility of seeking compensation for the emotional distress caused by his infidelity and the subsequent chaos he brought into our lives. Although I had reservations about the feasibility of securing financial support from his economically strained family, I was resolved to pursue alimony. To my surprise, shortly after initiating these proceedings, his mistress transferred $118,000 in alimony. However, the relationship faltered soon after the vault incident as the money depleted. Their commitment to each other became painfully clear that my ex-husband, his parents, and his mistress were all struggling to keep their financial heads above water. My ex-husband, who was nearing retirement, unfortunately lost his job amidst this turmoil. His parents, trying to scrape by, found low-paying jobs in cleaning services, but were barely managing to make ends meet. Meanwhile, despite his efforts working 3 part-time jobs, my ex-husband's ongoing gambling addiction continued to undermine any semblance of financial stability. In light of these challenges, I stood firm on my alimony demands. I instructed my lawyer to convey a clear message. Real apologies must be demonstrated through actions, not just empty words. If they truly regretted their actions, they needed to show it tangibly, which in this context meant financially. Despite the opportunities I had offered my ex-husband to clear his debts and start anew, under the influence of his gambling-addicted parents, he squandered them. I found myself reflecting on my own financial security. The $700,000 I had saved was the fruit of a lifetime of diligent saving and wise financial management. Realizing the importance of enjoying life while securing my future, I decided it was time to focus on personal fulfillment. I took pleasure in the simple joys of life, such as updating my bank book. I'd also opened a new bank account, ensuring better management and security of my finances. Currently, I lead a serene life with my cherished red cat Bella, who provides constant companionship and comfort. My son occasionally visits, bringing with him stories of his own life adventures and his girlfriend, which adds a layer of joy to my days. Now my priorities center around self-care and planning for the future. One of my first actions was to consider the purchase of a new, larger vault, a practical measure to ensure the safety of my accumulated savings. This step was not just about security, but also about reclaiming control over my life and my assets. With Bella by my side, I find myself more content and happier than I've ever been. The tumult of the past, marked by betrayal and financial strife, is now behind me. I look forward to a peaceful and fulfilling future, knowing that I have the resilience and independence to face whatever may come. This period of tranquility and empowerment is not just a phase, but a new chapter in my life, one that I embrace wholeheartedly. As I continue to thrive and find happiness in the simplicity and security of my new life. My name is Karen, and I am a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to Paul for 3 years, who I met through a family friend. My family is somewhat wealthy, and since my sister Janet and I are the only children, our relatives were concerned about who would inherit our family's assets. This is why they introduced me to Paul. Paul moved in with us at my family home shortly after we met. My mom had passed away a few years before, so it was just my dad, my husband, and me living together. Paul was very nice and took good care of my father. However, the family friend who introduced us warned me just before our wedding that Paul was very interested in money. This worried me, but Paul didn't show any signs of greed, so we got married. Even so, I kept an eye on him because of what the family friend said. Paul didn't seem greedy, but he was curious about my father's wealth. He often asked about it casually when he and my father were drinking together. But since my father spoke openly about it, I wasn't too concerned. Paul also took an interest in my sister Janet, who is 6 years younger than me and very lively and outgoing. Unlike my calm major, Janet has flashy relationships with men and looks quite different from me, which surprised Paul when he first saw her. Watching Paul be fascinated by Janet, who was so different from me, made me feel uneasy. One day, when Paul found out I couldn't inherit my father's estate, he yelled at me, "You can't inherit the property. I have no use for you anymore. We're getting divorced right now." Later, after he remarried, I got my revenge on him and my sister. At first, I believed that having a beautiful sister meant there was nothing to worry about, but I eventually realized the reasons behind our relatives' concerns. My father doted on my sister, providing her with every opportunity, including the chance to attend both college and community college. After graduating, however, my sister lacked a clear purpose for her education. She seemed mainly interested in avoiding work. Our mother tried to encourage her to get a job immediately after her first college graduation, but my father supported her decision to continue her education at community college. After completing her studies there, she secured a position at a company owned by one of my father's acquaintances. This job, however, lasted only 6 months. She resigned with the unexpected excuse that she couldn't showcase her talents at that workplace. Both my mother and I were taken aback. My sister spoke as if she fully understood the job despite her minimal experience. My father, her supporter, quickly found her another job. It wasn't long after she started this new role that my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. During this time, my sister visited her daily, frequently taking time off from her new job. She eventually resigned from this position too, claiming she needed to care for her mother. But her idea of care involved mostly chatting with our mother or being engrossed in her mobile phone in the waiting room. I found myself handling practical tasks such as changing my mother's hospital laundry while my sister offered little real assistance. It may have been comforting for my mother to have company, but her condition deteriorated. About a month after she was hospitalized, she soon reached a point where she could no longer speak. Within 3 weeks of her condition worsening, my mother passed away. The suddenness of her passing left both my father and sister too shaken to even prepare for the funeral. This left a significant burden on me during an already difficult time. After my mother passed away, I found myself handling all the arrangements. Fortunately, our relatives helped, and we were able to bid farewell to her peacefully. In the wake of this, my sister took on a part-time job and moved into her own place. However, her earnings from the job weren't sufficient to cover her rent and other living expenses. Consequently, our father stepped in, covering her rent and utility bills, while the money she made was mostly spent on her leisure activities. Whenever her part-time income proved inadequate, she would turn to our father for additional financial support. Under our mother's watch, such requests were kept in check, as she was strict about financial discipline with my sister. However, after her death, my father began to indulge these requests, providing whatever money my sister asked for without hesitation. Initially, I saw no issue with this setup, assuming both my father and sister were content. Even after marrying and living with my husband in my parents' home, this financial arrangement continued, unknown to me. At the time, my sister also began asking my husband for money, and he complied, often asking her to keep it a secret to avoid causing me any jealousy. He found it difficult to say no to my attractive sister and willingly contributed to her expenses. My sister essentially lived off the money she received from both my father and my husband, engaging with her part-time job only sporadically and according to her whims. This unsustainable lifestyle came to an abrupt end when our father became ill and required hospitalization. I stepped in to care for him, balancing hospital visits with my work responsibilities. Despite the severity of our father's condition, my sister never appeared at the hospital. Instead, she began calling me aggressively, demanding money. She argued that since she had been receiving a regular allowance from our father, I should continue providing for her as before, stating that her rent and utilities were still being deducted from our father's account. Her tone was confrontational, and I was stunned by these revelations. I became infuriated by her selfish attitude, so on maintaining her own lifestyle while completely disregarding our father's well-being in the hospital. The situation exposed a painful truth about my sister's priorities and strained our relationship even further. I was tempted to hang up on her, but she sounded like she was in trouble, so I asked her how much money Dad has been giving her every month and suggested she get a full-time job and support herself with what you earn. My sister responded irritably, "Stop nagging. I was getting $1,000 a month, and remember, rent is separate." I was shocked by her response. She seemed proud of the amount, and it made me think that if I continued to give her this much money each month, she would never be motivated to work seriously. At first, I didn't see a problem with giving her money, thinking my father would soon recover from his hospitalization. But then his condition took a turn for the worse, and I quickly reached out to our relatives. The doctor confirmed it was serious, which shocked me. During this stressful time, I needed my husband's support, but he rarely visited the hospital, claiming he was busy with work. When he did visit, he asked inappropriate questions like, "Frank's estate must be huge, right, since you and your sister are the only heirs? Are you going to split it in half?" I was speechless. My husband seemed only interested in the inheritance, and I felt a mix of realization and disgust, understanding what the relatives meant when they said he was obsessed with money. When I called my sister to inform her of our father's critical condition, her only concern was about her finances. "Make sure you pay me every month. I can't live without that money," she demanded. The call ended suddenly, leaving me furious at her words, but I was also worried because I thought I heard a faint male voice in the background. About a month later, my father passed away. Sadly, neither my sister nor my husband was with him in his last moments. From my experience with my mother's funeral, I knew how tough it was to organize one. Neither my husband nor my sister offered any help, and my sister didn't even come to the funeral. My husband did show up, but left quickly, claiming he had work. A relative who had introduced us asked me, "Where's Paul?" It's odd for the husband not to be here, isn't it? I just gave a forced smile and said he was busy with work and had gone home. The relative seemed disappointed, and I felt like sighing too. After my father's funeral, when I finally had a moment to myself, my husband asked me with a sly smile, "So how much did you inherit?" Even if you split it, you must have gotten a lot, right? Just like the relatives had warned before our marriage, he was only interested in my father's inheritance. I told him, looking straight at him, my sister got $100 million, and I got nothing. I hadn't even spoken to the lawyer yet, and was still dealing with the funeral. Seeing my husband so excited about the inheritance almost made me laugh rather than angry. Believing what I said, he immediately shouted, "What? You can't inherit any property. I don't need you anymore. Let's get divorced now." I felt the same way, so I snapped back, "Let's do it. You married me for my father's inheritance anyway." I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. He seemed surprised, as if he hadn't expected this, but he signed them anyway. As he left the house after signing the divorce papers, he said bitterly, "I'll divorce you, who gets 0, and remarry your sister Janet, who gets the $100 million. And then he left. I didn't care what he said and went ahead with the divorce, happy to be rid of my awful husband. It seemed like he started trying to marry my sister the very next day. A few days later, he called me demandingly. "Do you still believe that story? When will you sort out the inheritance? Hurry up and give Janet the $100 million. He shouted this over the phone. I had been waiting for him to contact me because I didn't want to reach out first after he left. I answered him calmly, "Let's discuss this at my place next Sunday. I'm preparing for the procedure and will be waiting," thinking he was about to receive the inheritance. My ex-husband happily ended the call. However, I was actually looking forward to seeing his reaction when he discovered the truth. On the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister came to my family home and were surprised to see a lawyer there. My ex tried to act normal, thinking, "Of course you need a lawyer when inheriting a lot of money." Then the lawyer looked puzzled at my ex-husband and began, "Compensation claim before we talk about any inheritance." The lawyer then showed my ex-husband several photos of him leaving my sister's house, clearly dated before our divorce was finalized. "These are evidence of infidelity," the lawyer told him. "So you owe compensation." I had overheard him discussing the inheritance with my sister and had asked the lawyer to look into his infidelity. They might have thought I was too distracted by my father's funeral, but my ex-husband and sister were meeting at her place almost daily, giving me plenty of evidence. The topic quickly shifted from inheritance to compensation, leaving my ex-husband and sister shocked. However, my ex-husband recovered quickly and scoffed. "Compensation is nothing compared to the $100 million from the inheritance. I'll pay for it right away." He then signed the compensation documents provided by the lawyer, trying to appear unconcerned and confident. I confirmed everything and told him, "Enjoy your life with my sister who inherited nothing since you signed. I'll make sure you pay the compensation." When they heard there was no inheritance, my sister screamed in shock and her husband turned bright red, angrily saying, "There's no way the inheritance is 0. I won't let you take it all for yourself." The lawyer then calmly began to explain to the furious couple, "Janet is technically the stepdaughter of your late mother and was not legally adopted by your late father. Therefore, there is no legal parent-child relationship, and Janet cannot inherit anything from your father's estate." I'd also explained to my confused sister about our family history. When our parents remarried, Janet, you were about a year old, so you probably don't remember. But I do. I was 8 years old when our parents were married, and I was happy to suddenly have a sister. I never imagined that my sister would end up taking my husband. Our parents had children from previous relationships, and someone thought it best for them to remarry. My mother treated me as if I were her own daughter, and my father was very fond of my sister. Maybe because she wasn't his biological daughter, he spoiled her a bit extra, wanting to make sure she felt loved. Although both our parents had children from previous marriages, my mother, who was suspected by some relatives of targeting our wealthy family's assets, refused to legally adopt my sister. The relatives only suggested marriage proposals for me because they knew I was the only one who could legally inherit my father's property. If our parents had had a child together, it might have made things even more complicated. But fortunately or unfortunately, they never did. Now I understand why my father continued to support my sister financially even after she grew up. He couldn't leave her any inheritance. I never legally adopted my mother, so legally we weren't parent and child. But that never mattered in how we lived every day. It turns out that my parents had never explained to my sister that they were both previously married before they got together. She only learned this truth today when my ex-husband realized the situation. His face quickly changed from bright red to pale blue. He had not only failed to secure any inheritance from my sister, but had also signed a document obligating him to pay compensation. Looking visibly shocked, my ex-husband asked me, "Was what you said about my sister getting $100 million and me getting nothing a lie?" I struggled to hold back my laughter and replied, "Of course it was a lie. I said it to get back at you for cheating on me. Plus, there's no such thing as a bankrupt estate worth $100 million. Even my wealthy father didn't have that kind of money." Suddenly, my sister, who had been quiet until then, screamed out, "I've been relying on Dad's inheritance and have been spending a lot. What about the money Dad used to give me? Will Karen cover it now?" I responded to my sister, who seemed panicked. "You have a dependable husband now, so you shouldn't need that money anymore, should you? Let Paul take care of you." She turned to look at her pale-faced husband, who shook his head and said, "I've also done a lot of shopping expecting to receive the inheritance, so I can't afford it. Plus, I have the compensation to pay. So I'm financially stretched." At that point, my ex-husband began to apologize profusely to me. "Karen, I'm really sorry. It was all my fault. Will you forgive me and consider starting over?" Watching this scene, the lawyer had to stifle his laughter as he prepared to leave. The confidence and arrogance my ex-husband had shown upon arriving had completely evaporated, and his deep apologies now seemed utterly absurd. After we finished our discussion, my ex-husband and my sister left the house looking defeated. Not long after, they divorced. My ex-husband, who had remarried with the intention of gaining an inheritance, suddenly found himself without interest in my sister once the prospect of money was gone. He even muttered to himself that with the compensation payments he owed me, he couldn't possibly support my sister with no assets to his name. It was decided that he would pay the compensation in installments from his monthly paycheck. The lawyer recommended this method as the most practical solution under the circumstances. After my father's passing, the consequences of his indulgent support became painfully apparent. My sister, who had grown accustomed to financial support from our father, found herself in an unenviable position. She was compelled to work part-time jobs which barely paid enough to cover her daily expenses, let alone the mounting debts that loomed over her. Despite her efforts, the financial burden proved too heavy. Eventually overwhelmed by the accumulating debt, she had no choice but to file for personal bankruptcy. In a desperate move to escape her financial woes, she gave up her condominium, disappearing without leaving a trace. As of now, her whereabouts remain unknown, leaving a void in the family that once depended on each other so deeply. The situation underscored a harsh reality. Our father's well-intentioned but ultimately misguided financial support had shielded my sister from the necessity of developing a work ethic and financial independence. This protection, while provided out of love, had left her ill-prepared for the harsh realities of adult life. As for myself, the aftermath of these family troubles and the dissolution of my marriage left me residing alone in the family home. A house that now felt too large and empty, echoing with memories of a happier, more intact family. The solitude, however, provided me with ample time for reflection. It became a period of self-discovery and reassessment of what I truly wanted out of life. During this introspective period, some well-meaning relatives suggested that perhaps the time had come for me to consider entering into a new relationship. They talked about introducing me to potential suitors, hoping that a new partnership might bring me happiness and stability. However, the bitter experience with my ex-husband, who had shown his true colors as someone more interested in financial gain than in genuine companionship, made me wary of repeating past mistakes. His betrayal had been a painful lesson in discernment, teaching me the importance of knowing someone's character and intentions thoroughly before making such a profound commitment. Determined to take control of my own destiny, I decided to decline the offers for my relatives to arrange introductions. The thought of being matched with another partner who might view me as merely a means to an end was intolerable. Instead, I resolved to find a partner on my own terms. Guided by the lessons learned from my past experiences, this decision was empowering, marking a new chapter in my life where I could prioritize my own values and desires in a relationship. In embracing this newfound independence, I began to explore various avenues for meeting potential partners, whether through social events, community activities, or even online dating platforms. I was committed to finding someone who shared my values, someone who sought a partner for the right reasons, valuing respect, honesty, and genuine affection above financial considerations. This journey was not just about finding a new partner. It was about reclaiming my autonomy and learning to trust again after betrayal. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of my ability to shape my future, a future where my choices would lead to genuine connection and real love, rather than transactional relationships defined by financial dependency. Thus, as I move forward, the lessons of the past remain with me, a guide to avoiding the pitfalls that had once ensnared my family and me, and a beacon towards a more hopeful and self-determined future. I work at a big company, and I can earn enough for both of us, so don't worry, Eric said during our engagement. But as soon as we got married, he changed. He and Larry started insulting me every day. On top of that, Eric took control of all the money and cut down on living expenses. He constantly complained even though I did all the cooking. Fed up, I told Eric I wanted a divorce and left the house. Later, I bumped into Larry by chance. "Hey, I heard you're getting a divorce now," he said. I was surprised and replied, "You must be mistaking me for someone else." Larry smirked and said, "Don't pretend. We're not together anymore, so don't come to me about money. I won't lend you a cent. Remember that." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of people passing by, and started to laugh. Poor guy, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. I'm Michelle, a 53-year-old housewife. I married Eric 7 years ago. When we met, Eric seemed like a great guy. We met at a gathering of friends, and I found him fun and friendly. As we said goodbye, he asked if we could meet just the two of us next time. Feeling a bit sad about parting, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned he had a son named Larry from his previous marriage. Larry was in 5th grade then, and we had dinner together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Eric proposed, I decided to open up. You know, I live with my parents and work part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduation was really tough, and it ruined my health, I said. Is that so? It must have been hard to quit, Eric replied. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future, I added. Eric smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. I work at a big company, and I can earn enough for both of us." Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was happy to have met a good man and thought we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined I would feel so hopeless in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Eric and Larry's attitudes changed a lot. They started making fun of everything I did and said, "Mom, are you in bed again? Where's my sandwich?" Larry asked with a frown as he came into the bedroom before school. I had been helping with a wedding at a nearby park yesterday and felt sick because it was an unusually hot day. I had already been feeling unwell since the day before. I had asked Eric for help, but he refused with an annoyed look and said, "Being a housewife must be nice, just slacking off all day. I need my days off too, you know. Let me rest." The next morning I couldn't get up because I had pushed myself too hard. I apologized to Larry and said, "Sorry, Larry. I couldn't make your sandwich. Here's some money to buy one at the grocery store." Larry complained, "Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook." His words hurt. "Don't blame Mom, Larry," Eric said with a half smile as he passed by in the hallway. "Since you skipped the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be fancy." "Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping all day, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly without slacking." The two of them laughed at my poor condition and made their insensitive comments before leaving as if I could prepare a fancy meal. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Eric is extremely stingy, despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary. The money he gave me for living expenses was ridiculously low. It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it? Eric insisted on managing the finances himself after we got married, and I meekly agreed. I thought it didn't matter who handled the money as long as it was done properly. But then Eric started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential, he would say as an excuse to buy expensive clothes and watches for himself. But he would make a sour face even if I needed something small. When I bought cheap snacks, Eric would get angry because he believed a housewife doesn't need any spending money. I had to ask for his permission every time I wanted to spend money, whether it was for a haircut or buying clothes. "One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more," he would ask. I replied, "I want a warm pair for winter." He said, "Fine, but get them from a cheap store." I also wanted to go to the hair salon regularly. "Can I go once every 3 months to keep my hairstyle?" I asked. Eric scoffed, "Why do you need to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 7 months. No more haircuts." Because of this, I was only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I wanted to use better products because the cheap ones were harsh on my skin. But Eric didn't care. The money Eric gave for living expenses was very low, about 1/3 of what most people spent. With this small budget, it was hard to maintain a balanced diet. When I complained, Eric responded smugly. On the TV show about saving money, they lived on this amount. They had a farmer relative who gave them vegetables and bread. I told him, "That's not possible with these high prices." He replied, "That's your job to manage." What really hurt me was how Eric acted when it came to sending a wreath for my dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been sick, passed away, and it was time to send a wreath, Eric frowned and said, "We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right? Only the main mourners need to send one." He suggested, "Use your savings. It's not my problem." As I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes, his lack of care made me angry. I said, "I never planned to ask you for it." "So don't worry," he replied. "Good. But do Larry and I really have to go? It'll ruin our long weekend, right?" "Dad," Larry added, "I wanted to play a new game." Although they complained, I didn't doubt they would come. However, Eric and Larry arrived late to the funeral, barely greeted my mom and relatives, and left quickly. My mom, who was very tired, didn't have the energy to get upset, but my relatives were furious. "What's going on, Eric? Your wife's father died, and you're acting so cold. Larry, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Michelle's dad," they said. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for Eric and Larry quickly fading. Eric, always in his stylish suits with a charming presence, and Larry, attending a prestigious university and seen as a handsome father and son by the neighbors, only insulted me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, instead wandering around and coming back with the smell of lipstick and perfume. Despite doing whatever they wanted, they treated me like a maid, demanding a fancy meal with the little money I had for food. When I served dishes with chicken or pork, both Eric and Larry would glare at me with disdain and insult me. "Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he comes home from work? If I get sick from eating this bad food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom?" they would say. I could make delicious meals even with chicken or pork. They disliked vegetables and fish, but eating such a picky diet will make you sick, Eric would reply. "I'd eat if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as weak as you." They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just left the food untouched. Yet if I didn't cook, they would yell, "Are you slacking off even though you're a wife?" I would eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, but tears would well up as I wondered for whom I was cooking their meals. They relied on store-bought sandwiches, instant noodles, and snacks eventually. Eric was diagnosed with prediabetes during a company health check, and Larry started gaining weight. It was inevitable. Then they lashed out at me, saying, "What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce." "Then I'll leave," I said. They were surprised when I agreed easily. "Are you sure you're unemployed? You've been living off me. How will you survive now?" Eric asked. "Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up," I replied. "Nobody's going to take your stuff," Eric sneered. "You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who let you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right?" "That's right, you've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on," Larry added as I packed my clothes into a suitcase. Eric and Larry kept talking behind me. Honestly, I admired Eric's ability to overestimate himself so much when we were dating. I saw this part of him as confident and shining. "You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your retired mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty," Eric said. Larry laughed at his father's prediction. "They'll end up on welfare soon. They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate." The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too, like a poor family's funeral. "I want a fancy one," Larry agreed. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world. Their endless comments made me really angry, but I knew it was pointless to argue, so I just let it go. After I went back home and explained everything to Mom, she said in a low voice, "At the funeral, seeing Eric and Larry, I felt something was wrong, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household, so I kept quiet. I was too busy taking care of Dad." "I'm sorry for barging in like that," I replied. "It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here?" Mom's concern was comforting, but I knew living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting sometimes seemed like the right balance. Yes, Eric and Larry mocked me for being unemployed, but actually I had been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After getting many positive comments, I bravely launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm getting ready to publish a cookbook. Because of this, I didn't have time to think much about the divorce, and the days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I stopped stirring the ingredients in the pan and answered, "Hello." "Hey, what's this about a clause for the divorce trial?" Eric asked. I sighed, knowing it was about that. "You and Larry insulted me all the time," I said. "Oh, I thought, never mind," Eric said with relief in his voice. "I didn't cheat or anything, you know. Did you record me and Larry?" "Your memory alone won't work," I replied. "I've noted everything in my diary. Try to claim otherwise if you can." Eric scoffed. "Really, poor people and their obsession with money. You're so stingy. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead." After his outburst, Eric hung up. I finished cooking and then visited a detective agency to investigate Eric's background. Soon, his affair with a coworker was uncovered. The day after, I sent photos of the two of them together and the investigation report to his company. Eric contacted me again. "You spread this at work is low." The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm in trouble, he said. "I'm fired." "Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she?" "It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such things," I said, laughing. "But you should be fine, right? With all the savings you did, you must have plenty of money," I continued. Larry moved into a dorm this spring because commuting was tough. I prepaid dorm fees and have apartment loans. My savings were drained by that woman. "She was two-timing me with a younger guy," Eric replied. "Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit, I'll also take half the value of the apartment for property distribution. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account," I said. Eric was yelling on the other end, but I hung up without caring. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Larry. He was dressed in his usual flashy clothes, with piercings all over his face and an eye-catching hairstyle, making him easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Larry raised his hand in greeting. "Hey, I heard you're getting government assistance now," he said. I looked puzzled. "Huh, who are you mistaking me for?" "Don't pretend," Larry said, smirking. "It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic." Feeling really angry, I couldn't help but reply, "Getting government help is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that." Yeah. So you're saying you're getting it too?" Larry said, smirking and pointing his finger at me. "Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money." Remember that, as I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the states of passers, by shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh. It was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Larry. Reluctantly, I called back. Larry shouted furiously, "You deceived me, old woman." "What are you talking about?" I've heard from a cousin. "You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly," he said. "That's my personal asset. Why should I share it? I have to tell you or Eric. It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce. Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Eric officially. I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the process until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Eric. Larry shouted in frustration. A rich woman like you getting government help. I'll report you to the authorities right now. Feel free, I replied. It's not me but Eric who is receiving it. Larry fell silent. What I told you last time, it's not me, I explained, as if talking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from my cooking website and book sales, which I started secretly. But Eric, after spending all his money on his affair, has lots of bills piling up and is borrowing heavily. Are you listening? Dad's on government assistance now, I said, pulling the phone away from my ear as Larry screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued, You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives, he asked for money. He's behind on his apartment rent and facing eviction. Staying at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other end for a while. Then Larry said resentfully, You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying him. If you have money, you should give some to Dad. Why should I? I said, Since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories. I don't feel like I owe him anything, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time, after all. I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to hanging out with friends and stuff, Larry said, suddenly evasive. I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea. How do you know that? He asked. The other day in town, I saw you from across the street after we parted. You met up with a girl at a club and went into a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house. Using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question, Larry stammered. That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination. Yeah, the credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it before it's due, I replied. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. I sighed and ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Eric and Larry showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang nonstop, and when I answered, there they were, expecting they came to ask for money. I let them in to avoid causing a scene in the neighborhood. Eric and Larry, who used to look so stylish, now appeared completely different, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty pants, with lifeless and gaunt eyes, yet they still had the energy to be sarcastic. As they walked into the living room, Eric looked around and sneered, Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension. This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline, I said. Eric, lifting his chin arrogantly, replied, Michelle, I'll forgive you now. So let's remarry. You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work, so come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So, Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure. Stunned, I was speechless after a moment. Intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule and fool me? I shouted at the astonished Eric and Larry. After treating me like nothing more than a housekeeper, insulting me, not providing proper living expenses, and then kicking me out, now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments. No way. What, you're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy, knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding pay. You're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky, Eric retorted in the middle of the argument. Mom returned from shopping. Eric and Larry immediately started buttering her up. Please lend us some money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Michelle gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see. How have you been, Grandma? Please persuade Mom to remarry Dad. He doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn. Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their words. She placed her shopping bag on the floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you, she said. What? Eric and Larry responded, confused. I'm telling you to have some shame, Mom shouted suddenly. Startled by her loud voice, Eric and Larry were understandably confused. Mom usually never scolded them sharply. I've heard everything about the divorce from Michelle. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here, Mom said firmly. No, Michelle's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side too, Eric said quickly. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar, Larry added. I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Larry's words sternly, not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance. Go back to sleep. She drove them to the front door and glared at them one last time. You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police. Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Eric, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Eric was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one. His in-laws, hearing about his situation, for relatives stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Eric's behavior. Later, Eric, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside, pretending he was helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading both children and elders to point and laugh at him. There's thrifty Uncle Eric, even with a degree from a good university and a job at a big company. What's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant? They would say. The reason for his divorce from his first wife was all his reckless spending. He'll never change. Being mocked by the villagers was embarrassing. Eric kept sending me persistent messages asking to remarry to save face, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial security deposit. I also made Larry pay back the money he used on the credit card without permission. Even though he was enrolled in a prestigious university and was on track to become successful like his father, Larry started skipping classes and fooling around. This led to failing grades and eventually getting expelled. His friends and girlfriends were worried, but Larry in his arrogance pushed them away with his prideful comments. He then had a big fight with Eric, saying, "You're my father, but you won't help pay off the debt." Now they don't talk to each other. Larry lives alone in a small apartment, getting by with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and making sarcastic remarks despite his high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. My cooking website is doing well, and I signed a book deal. I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment I inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 75, and the high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if she needs anything. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage didn't work out, I want to keep having a good relationship with Mom.